Once upon a time there was a gentleman who had a gentle and lovely wife, and they had a daughter together. The daughter was kind and obedient, but unfortunately, her mother passed away when she was still young. Her father decided to marry again, but his new wife and her two daughters were proud and unkind, making life difficult for the young girl. One day the king's son announced a grand ball, and everyone was invited, including the two stepsisters. They were ecstatic, planning and talking about their rich dresses. However, Cinderella, as she was called, was left behind, feeling sad and alone. But then her fairy godmother appeared to her, promising to help her attend the grand ball. Her godmother used her magic to turn a pumpkin into a beautiful coach, mice into horses, rats into a coachman, and postilion, and lizards into footmen. She then transformed Cinderella's old rags into a stunning ball gown and gave her a pair of delicate glass slippers. Cinderella arrived at the ball, grabbing everyone's attention with her beauty. The prince was enamored by her, but she had to leave before the clock struck 12. As her godmother, everybody with wonder, the gallant prince gave her a courteous welcome and led her into the ballroom, and the king and queen were as much enchanted with her as the prince conducted her to the supper table and was too much occupied in waiting upon her to partake of anything himself. While seated, Cinderella heard the clock strike 11:15. She rose to leave, the prince pressing her to accept an invitation for the ball on the following evening. On reaching home, her godmother praised her for being so punctual and agreed to let her go to the next night's ball. Although she seemed to be tired, her sisters, instead of showing pity, teased her with glowing accounts of the splendid scene they had just left, and spoke particularly of the beautiful princess. Cinderella was delighted to hear all this, and asked them the name of the princess, but they replied nobody knew her. So much did they say in praise of the lady, that Cinderella expressed a desire to go to the next ball to see the princess, but this only served to bring out their dislike of poor Cinderella still more, and they would not lend her the meanest of their dresses. The next evening the two sisters went to the ball, and Cinderella also, who was still more splendidly dressed than before. Her enjoyment was even greater than at the first ball, and she was so occupied with the prince's tender sayings that she was not so quick in marking the progress of time. To her alarm, she heard the clock strike 12. She fled from the ballroom, but in a moment the coach changed, again to a pumpkin, the horses to mice, the coachman and postilion to rats, the footmen to lizards, and Cinderella's beautiful, dressed to her old shabby clothes. In her haste she dropped one of her glass slippers and reached home out of breath, with none of her godmother's fairy gifts, but one glass slipper. When her sisters arrived, after the ball, they spoke in terms of rapture of the unknown princess, and told Cinderella about the little glass slipper she had dropped, and how the prince picked it up. It was evident to all the court that the prince was determined, if possible, to find out the owner of the slipper, and a few days afterwards a royal herald proclaimed that the king's son would marry her, whose foot the glass slipper should be found exactly to fit. This proclamation caused a great sensation. Ladies of all ranks were permitted to make a trial of the slipper, but it was of no use. Cinderella now said, "Let me try, perhaps it may fit me." It slipped on in a moment. Great was the vexation of the two sisters at this, but what was their astonishment when Cinderella took the slipper out of her pocket. At that moment the godmother appeared and touched Cinderella's clothes with her wand. Her sisters then saw that she was the beautiful lady they had met at the ball, and throwing themselves at her feet,
craved her forgiveness.
A short time after, she was married to the prince,